I'm glad to have Andrei Znamenski on the video with me today. As I told him, I don't want to be too much of an interview. I want him to talk. He wrote the book. I didn't. But I do want to make one statement about him as an introduction. And it was something that a good friend of mine, my best friend, who lived in Israel for 18 years, his mentor in Virginia said, "The man with an experience is never at the mercy with the man with an argument." I have an argument. Andrei has both the argument and the experience. And that's why I really believe you should read his book. Now, if you can get his paperback book from Amazon for $45, the Mises Institute has ordered copies of the book, and $40. It should be in. They should be in any day. The book salesman there says Brandon. So, Andrei, just have at it. Tell a little bit about your being in Russia, coming to America, and why in 1991, and sort of some of the same things that you've done after 91 and currently what you're doing at the University of Memphis.
All right. Thank you, Richard, for introducing me. And I'm glad to welcome all our small audience, those people who joined us today. So my name is Andrei Znamenski. The last name is tongue-twisting, hard to spell, hard to say. So just Andrei in this case. So I teach history at University of Memphis. At the same time, I'm a scholar, fellow scholar at the Mises Institute. Okay, so I'm affiliated with Mises Institute. I did my PhD degree, first PhD degree in St. Petersburg Pedagogical University. It was a long time ago, 1988, okay? And it was in the world history. Then I came here. So before I came here, I had an experience of living in the Soviet Union. It was the late Soviet Empire, okay? Then when the empire was falling down in 1991, I came here to do my second PhD. And it was in Ohio, University of Toledo, Ohio, so the Great Lakes. So I did my PhD there in 1997 and taught for 12 years in Alabama State University. And then I came here, University of Memphis. So that's essentially my story, okay, my personal biography. So now what I'm doing, why I'm here today. The reason I'm here today, I'm going to share with you my thoughts about my most recent book called Socialism as a Secular Creed, okay? It's Global History of Socialism. Yeah, that's the book. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, that's the one. But before I came to write this book, I was involved into several other projects. See, my original specialty was the history of religions. So basically, I'm a historian of religions. And in fact, I taught for several years Introduction into Religions in University of Memphis. I also teach courses on the world history here in Memphis. So this book, which Richard showed to you, actually is indirectly a product of my interest in the history of religions, okay? I did my PhD, strange as it may sound, on Native Americans and Greek Orthodox Church in Alaska. So I researched some Native American communities who were totally Greek Orthodox. So I tried to find out why they converted to Orthodox Church, okay? So it was in the 1990s, long time ago. Then when I was doing this research, I met some mostly Caucasian people in Alaska and the United States who were very much in so-called tribal spirituality. They idealized, romanticized Native Americans, so non-Western people. And it struck me as an unusual phenomenon, okay? So, and my interest then shifted. I started to research these Westerners, Western people, who somehow were attracted to non-Western civilizations, okay? They idealized tribal people. They idealized the Hindu people, like Chinese people. And I wrote a book about them, about these people. So, and I realized that there was something going on in the Western civilization, like self-hatred. So I realized that since 1960s, there was something going on in the Western civilization, a lot of not only critique, but animosity. There is a group of people among elites, among our intellectuals, who actually hate the Western civilization. They believe it's racist, it's abusive, it's oppressing, and the wisdom is not here. In order to get a high wisdom, you have to go to third world countries, Oriental countries, tribal societies like Native Americans, because these societies, non-Western societies, in their leftist view, they're supposed to be, they're ecological, they're collectivist, they're friendly. So that's what I started to research. See how I gradually moved to my project. And then I realized that right now in our Western societies, we have a revival of this type of attitudes. And it's a lot of ideas like this. They are widespread where? On the left. I'm not saying that there are some on the right wing, the right wing on political spectrum. There are also people who are hooked on this, idealizing some non-Western civilization, but they are minority. Mostly right now, these people are on the left. They trash Western culture, Western civilization, okay? And that's how gradually I became interested in socialism, okay? Although I lived under socialism in the late Soviet Empire, again, I was not originally, I didn't do it as my research topic originally, but now it is my research topic. So it's like I'm coming back home, so to speak, because I became interested in exploring why left ideas became captivated the minds of millions of people, okay? And then I realized that the present day left that idealize non-Western societies who don't like the Western civilization. These are new left. These are the new left. Old left were the opposite, okay? They were absolutely different, okay? For example, if you look into Karl Marx, if you look at Friedrich Engels, these names are important for us because these were the founders of the Marxian socialism, Marx and Engels. They, in fact, defended Western civilization. They defended colonialism. Why? Because they had a viewpoint that if capitalism, if Western civilization developed full-fledged, it will push us further toward communism, because they believed, Marx and Engels and people who followed them, that the salt of the earth, the people who would save us from so-called the world of oppression, these were the industrial working class, so-called the proletariat. They call it the proletariat, okay? That's the viewpoint of the old left, Marxian left, okay? They were popular in the 19th century and very much in the 20th century. These people were popular, Marxian socialists, okay? And they were hooked on this class concept. They idealized working class people. They romanticized them. So, and I realized when I started researching this, okay, the difference between the new left, who don't idealize working class anymore, and the old left, who had idealized the working class. So I thought for myself, I needed to explore this. There's something going on there, you know, because I see these new left and old left, they fighting each other. They're friends, but at the same time, they have their own infight about this. What is supreme? Working class people or the third world, okay? And we will be talking about it. So that's how, in order to clarify things for myself, and I hope I will clarify something for you, guys and girls.
Yeah.
I decided to write this book. I decided to research materials for this book, okay? So I decided to unpack, decipher the story of socialism, okay? How it came about, why it came about. And then what helped me that I was trained as historian of religion, I realized that Marxian socialism and socialism in general, it's a surrogate religion.
Yeah.
I call it a political religion. Why am I saying this? Why do I make this argument? Simply because I noticed that socialism rose in power when a traditional church, traditional Christian denominations, they started to decline.
Yep.
They started to decline. Okay. And it happened not because of some kind of cabal of people was sitting somewhere up above and they were thinking, how are we going to screw traditional churches? No, no. Unfortunately, it happened organically, okay, naturally. Okay, so that's where comes my argument that socialism emerged as a result of something that was going on in the Christian church, especially among the Protestants. Okay, so in this case, unless Richard interrupts me something to clarify, because, and I appreciate if you interrupt me, you know, because I need to be interrupted to clarify something. Huh?
Well, we will further this in a little by getting into the Enlightenment,
sure,
which you write about, and a lot of other. You know, once you hear a subject, it seems like it shows up everywhere after that, and you didn't notice it before. So the Enlightenment, every time I turn around, I see somebody writing about the Enlightenment. But before that, I want to get into chapter 1.
Excellent.
I think it's important. What is meant by the title, which is Religion of Modernity and Postmodernism? And then also it's stated socialism was the child of modernity.
Okay.
So go into that.
First, in my book, I have a first chapter. It says the religion of modernity. Okay. How English textile baron and French aristocrat jump-started socialism. Okay. This bookish expression, modernity, it's a sophisticated way of saying modern society. Okay. So scholars believe that modern society emerged somewhere in the 1700s and 1800s. Okay. So what does it mean, modern society? It's something scholars invented as a label to describe so-called industrial order. Okay. At the end of the 1700s, in early 19th century, they talked about industrial order when the textile machinery was introduced, when mechanics became popular, when factories were established, textile factories, water frames, and all kinds of industry, railroads. Okay, so there was a lot of fear among peasants, among aristocrats, among general population about this industrial order. They believed that this industrial order would destroy this pastoral nice life with lakes, with meadows, with forests, and good all England was going to die. You know, some English romantic poets said at that time, in the beginning of the 19th century. In France, there were also some romantic writers. Okay, that was the environment that started to breed socialism. Okay, there were some French and English aristocrats. They said, "Oh, we need to go back to the old times." Okay, in medieval times, it was good, but now factories with chimneys, they destroy everything, and that's when many peasants, they moved to the cities and they became workers. Okay, but there were groups of people, intellectuals, who said, "Hey, yes, life was good in old times. There were guilds. Everybody knew his or her place. But there's no way back. What we need to embrace this industrial order. In order to use this industrial order by the power of the government, we need to recreate this old life. You know, we will go back to collectivism, to these guilds, when people lived in this corporate world, you know, when everybody knew his or her place, but it will be done by the power of the government, by the power of machines. There would be groups of technocrats who will tell us how to go back to the old life, only on a new industrial level. Okay, that was the message of socialism. That is why we have these people. Okay, let me introduce them. Okay, like first name, those of us who can see us, I show you the picture. That's a Frenchman, Andrei Saint-Simon, who was active in 1810s, 1820s. He was a French aristocrat, okay, who argued that industry, it's a nice thing, although it destroys our old life, but we should harness it, we should use it. Government, helped by the scientists, should use industrial machinery, to organize society according to a plan. So everything should be planned from up above, okay? And eventually private property should be destroyed, and society should be ruled by groups of people. In each country, he said, there should be groups of people. He called them councils of Newton. Okay, so France should be headed by the Council of Newton. England should be headed by the Council of Newton. It's like a group of technocrats, group of experts, okay? There was another guy, okay? So let me show him his picture. Robert Owen, English textile manufacturer, who said, yes, a lot of misery, working class works 12 hours, no good. Okay, remember Charles Dickens' Hard Times, these books about satanic mills, chimneys destroy this pastoral landscape. And he sympathized with his workers, and he said, Robert Owen, I know how to organize people. So what he did, he introduced schools, which is a good thing in his premises. At the same time, he assigned special foremen to watch what families of working class were doing, you know, what they were doing in the evening, how they spend the time, how they raise the kids. So he was the one to control everything, because he said, I am the master, I'm an educated guy, I knew how to spend your time, okay? And in his factories, he also had these observers, foremen, who checked how much people produced, what they did, okay? So at the workplace, at the houses, people were always watched. So which eventually upset a lot of people. So people started escaping from him. So eventually he became bankrupt, this guy, Robert Owen, okay? And that's where the story becomes interesting, okay? So Robert Owen invited a group of people, and he said, 900 people, his sympathizers, we're going to the United States, and we are going to set up a community, socialist community, as a model community, to show to the humankind how people should live, okay? I failed in my industrial experiment. Workers did not appreciate it. So we're going to the United States, 1825, that's when it happened. So he goes to the Wabash River, Indiana, and he buys a land plot, okay? So bear with me, because I want to mention something very important. He buys a land plot from a guy who was named George Rapp. Again, those of us who can see us, they can see the picture of this guy. A German Protestant, Lutheran. A Lutheran who split away from the mainstream Lutheran church, and he set up a group of harmonists, so people who wanted to live in harmony, okay? They had a community of people on the Wabash River, and they called themselves Harmony. Now look what they were doing. They denounced the private property. It was a religious community, okay? They believed in Bible on the one hand, George Rapp, but at the same time, George Rapp with this group of German Lutherans who lived on the Wabash River, they said the Bible was not enough. We also should read some books about mysticism written by the Swedish engineer named Swedenborg. There was a mystic, okay, who said that we should practice spiritism, we should practice magnetism, we should do some alchemy. It was very popular at that time. See, a lot of crazy things. He also, George Rapp said, we need to read the scientific books in addition to the Bible. Why do I bring this up? Okay, why did I bring up this guy, J.Richard, and his Harmonites? Because I want to draw your attention to the very interesting things that were happening in the Protestant religion at that time, in the beginning of the 19th century. We have a landscape, a religious landscape of people, different groups that argued with each other, Protestant groups. Why did they happen? In the wake of Martin Luther, 1517, in the wake of Reformation, we have this movement against the papaism, when many Christians, especially in Northern Europe, they said, we don't need this great power above us. We don't need to respect the Pope. We don't need any middleman between the God and the people. Well enough. They had a point, right? We don't need the middleman. We need to talk with God directly without middlemen. How do we talk directly with God? And Martin Luther made a good point. He said, read the Bible. Read, so the words of God, the word of Jesus, you have to learn, you have to go straight to the book. So everybody started to read the Bible like crazy in Northern Europe. So we have the culture of readers come into the picture. By the way, recently, Jordan Peterson made a good show on his channel about how the Protestant movement unleashed the culture of reading in Northern Europe. That is why Northern Europeans became more educated than the rest of the world, because of the Bible. Men, women, and children were reading the Bible. Okay, and Martin Luther said, so every man is a minister. So he sent a message that everybody could read the Bible. We can have Bible discussion groups, unlike Catholics who didn't have this, okay? Because Catholics said, oh, you shouldn't read the Bible, listen to what your bishop or priest had to say, okay? So we have a bunch of groups who started to read the Bible, and they started to compete. Richard, they started to compete with each other, okay? They started to argue with each other. And the more and the more and the more, and their children and grandchildren, they took it further. So I'm simplifying the whole story, but essentially by the end of the 1700s, we have some different types of groups, and some of them were crazy, some of them were like all kinds of nuts, you know. Some of the people started to question like biblical miracles, you know. Some of these people said, hey, so what Bible said is not good enough. You know, we need to, like J.Richard said, we need to read other books, you know, it's not enough for us. So this criticism went everywhere. On the one hand, it made people very spiritual. For example, we have such groups like Methodists, 19th century, okay, very spiritual groups. Okay. On the other hand, we have gradual secularization. So some of these readers who critically looked at the Bible, they became the forerunners of the Enlightenment. Okay. And especially in the early 1800s, when we have the Second Great Awakening. Okay. Because the message of Martin Luther, again, was enhanced by these groups. They said, in order to successfully fight against Catholic Church, so we need either to preach the Bible, total emphasis on the Bible, okay? Whatever Bible said, it's absolutely true, and we need to go there, okay? We have Anabaptists, okay? Some of the people, like Quakers, they said, we should do whatever Bible teaches us, and literally, you know, don't bear arms, you know, all violences, but don't steal, you know, that's very this zealous behavior, you know. Other groups like J.Richard, Harmonists, they said, Bible is great, but it's not enough. We need to complement it with something, okay? And out of these groups, Harmonites, we have like secular groups popping up, okay? So that's how Robert Owen, socialists, they found this common language with Harmonists, because those people who joined Robert Owen, they were, many of them, they were former members of the Second Great Awakening, okay? Some of them belong to Lutherans, others belong to Puritans. They were Quakers, okay? They were Methodists, okay? So these were the people who joined Robert Owen. So Robert Owen took this message of secularism further. He started to denounce God completely. He said, okay, so Bible is no good. What we have, since we live on the industrial order, we have the scientists everywhere. So we need the science instead of God. Yeah. Science is going to save us. So we will use science to organize our society, okay? Instead of priests.
This is what I wanted you to get into.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Instead of priests, said Robert Owen, we are going to have scientists. And Saint-Simon and friends said the same thing. So they basically cross-fertilized each other, Saint-Simonians and Robert Owen, okay? In fact, Saint-Simon, getting feedback from Owenites, from Robert Owen, he wrote, before he died, he wrote a small book called The New Christianity, Andrei Saint-Simon. So he said, we need socialism as the new form of Christianity. He actually gave the title to his book. He said, New Christianity, okay? And this new type of Christianity will be based on science. And we are going to have experts, okay? And these experts are going to control and navigate our society, okay? In fact, Robert Owen and Henri Saint-Simon, they started to write letters to different prime ministers, to princes, to the Russian Tsar. They even sent a letter to the Pope. They said, we found the way how to organize our society. So that socialism is going to be socialism. And we have the groups of experts, scientists who hold the keys to the wisdom. And that's how it's going to be. You know, we don't need God. See, gradually they killed the God. That's what they did.
Nietzsche.
Yeah, some of them without knowing this. That's what I'm trying to say. And it became the new religion. In fact, I should tell you more. So this guy, again, I'll show you the picture of this, Henri Saint-Simon. So here is Henri Saint-Simon again. In fact, in France, to label him and his supporters, it was a big movement in 1820s, 1830s, 1840s in France. When he died, you know, there was a cult created around him by his students. And they created so-called Saint-Simonian religion. When you go to the books, contemporary books of that time in France, you will see that what they preached was called Saint-Simonian religion. And in all dictionaries, his ideas were described as socialism, as the new religion. When you go to Robert Owen, again, in England at that time, in books and brochures and dictionaries, it was described as a form of religion. I will tell you more, and I constantly emphasize this in my presentations. When you pick up an encyclopedia published in Britain, and you, Richard, you might remember this because in my Mises talk last year, I brought it up. There was an encyclopedia published in England in 1851. It was called Cyclopedia of Religious Denominations. Okay, and you will see there one of the entries called Socialism, written by Robert Owen, along with entries on Mormons, on Methodism, on Quakers. Okay, see, that's how it was viewed at that time. Okay, it's a form of religion, but it was already secularized. Now, interesting thing, okay, something like a small anecdote which I recently learned about, which might explain to you a lot of things, because sometimes anecdotes or visual experiences, they might be very helpful in this case, okay? So let's go back to the Wabash River, Indiana, okay? When Robert Owen comes to Indiana, 1825, and buys these premises, New Harmony it was called, that belonged to George Rapp and his sect, Lutheran sect, that believed both in the Bible and mysticism and science, okay, a little bit of both. So George Rapp wanted to sell Robert Owen these premises because he believed that he was a good man who was close to him in his views. But George Rapp and his community, they moved to Pennsylvania because they believed there were too many American farmers around who can corrupt their collectivism. Okay, so that is why they moved away. But Robert Owen believed if he bought this property from George Rapp, he would just the opposite, show the local farmers how he should live his life. Okay, so Robert Owen comes and buys Harmony, these premises, the church, barns, everything, for $250,000. It's a lot of money for that time. $250,000, 1825. Robert Owen. Okay, so basically he invested all his assets into this experiment. 900 people joined him, mostly intellectuals, writers, journalists who didn't know how to work on the land, which created problems later. So they purchased these premises. Those of you who can see us, I'm showing to you right now the church, Lutheran church, that was built by George Rapp and his supporters. Okay, this socialist religious community, okay, that preceded Robert Owen. So they buy the church, they buy the premises, and they begin to use this church. Very important. Not for church gatherings, of course, because Robert Owen said science was our savior. Instead of religion, the Bible, we have the science. And instead of priests, we have scientists. So they started to organize in this church Sunday scientific sermons. Okay. Plus, they said the church will be called the Hall of Science. Okay. And then something interesting happens. Again, you can believe in miracles. Some of you might believe in miracles. Some of you might not believe in miracles. Something interesting happens. Next year, a lightning strikes this church. Okay, so there was a top of the church, and the top of the church was crowned with a cross. Okay, so with the Protestant cross, you could see it on the picture right now. Okay, but next year in 1826, something happens. Mother Nature, by the will of God, strikes this church. And now I want to show you this watercolor that was done later when this socialist community was in a stage of decline. It's 1833 when a Swiss artist named Karl Bodmer by chance visited this community that was crumbling down, and some socialists stayed there, but mostly it was gone. So there was no top of the church. So basically lightning destroyed the top of the church. And there was a debate among supporters of Robert Owen. Shall we rebuild it? And of course, the majority said, we don't need this. The premises were still used for scientific sermons, and it was called the Hall of Science. So now, I don't know what you can make of this. I'm just telling you what I learned by reading the diaries of people who lived there. So there was not much debate. In fact, many people were happy that their cross was destroyed, because we are scientific people. We believe in reason. We don't need God. We believe in science. And that's what basically happened gradually. There were communities of people during the Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, who moved to complete secularization, okay? Who killed the God. Remember later, Nietzsche, it was a philosopher, who said that God is dead. And that's what they did. They killed basically God they evicted God from our life, okay? And they made this arrogant attempt to replace God with what? With the human reason, okay? In fact, a student of Robert Owen named Auguste Comte, let me tell you something, okay? Auguste Comte, that's his picture. Auguste Comte, if some of you know, he was the founder of discipline of sociology. He was the founder of sociology, okay? So this guy was the secretary for Robert Owen. Auguste Comte took it further. He said, we need actually create a special religion. It would be called the religion of reason, the religion of human beings. Okay, so he actually created a scientific religion where he was Catholic himself, where he replaced Catholic feast days like the day of Saint Nicholas, the Saint Sebastian Day, with the day of Isaac Newton, the day of Denis Diderot, who wrote the encyclopedia of enlightenment. So this type of stuff. So literally, we have to worship science. Okay, and of course, they believed they were the experts who knew the way. Okay, and that's where it started. In fact, Karl Marx, who later comes to the picture, who creates Marxian socialism. Okay, he was reading Auguste Comte. He liked this idea. Okay, so what I'm telling you right now, I'm describing to you pre-Marxian socialism. Okay, because Marx called them utopian socialists. He said these guys were good, but they were too nice, and they tried to persuade the governments, let's socialize everything, let's help everybody, let's distribute the wealth. But later Karl Marx comes to the picture, 1840s, and he said it's not enough because nobody voluntarily part with his or her property. So you have to make a revolution. You have to destroy everything. Okay, so these are utopians. Okay, they did a good job, but now we write the Communist Manifesto, 1843, and to make a point, not only we take it further, the message of Andrei Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, but we are even going to change the name. So we're going to talk about communism. So it's not enough to talk about socialism because it's like a gradual, slow move toward the bright future. You need a revolution, and that is why we're going to call ourselves communists. So that hence the Communist Manifesto, because original message of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels was that by using the word communism, we want to make a point that we are radical, we are militant. Okay, and that's how eventually it developed later. Okay, well, of course, we have a lot of confusion about the use of these words, but from the very beginning, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Moses Hess, who was also helping to shape socialism. Okay, they made this difference. They said socialism, it's a broad name for these good things we want to do, to eliminate private property and to create this golden paradise. But within socialist movement, there is another movement, militant, that tries to speed up the whole thing. And the name of this movement, communism. So Moses Hess, actually, in 1844, Moses Hess, it's a Jewish German intellectual who actually helped Marx and Engels to become friends. He introduced them to each other. Okay, so we don't know too much about this guy. Okay, when he explained the meaning of these two words, socialism and communism, he said, we need to make a point that communism is a more radical way to accomplish the same goals which socialism preaches. Okay, so that's basically what was going on in this so-called modern times, or some scholars describe it by the bookish word modernity. It's when industrial revolution kicks in, when the so-called industrial order comes to the picture, first factories emerge. That's what they call modernity.
Yeah, I tend to add a syllable to it, modernity, but that's wrong. It's what you just said. We can't go much longer because people don't like long videos.
Exactly.
I would like to sort of segue into Hess leaving Engels and Marx, and he was the precursor or to the Zionism project, and talk a little bit about just, for another 15 minutes, a little bit about that, because I wanted to get that in. The facts are what count to me, and many people don't know the facts about what happened through him and then Theodore Herzl. Is that the way you say his name?
Yeah, yeah.
who was the founder of modern Zionism. So I want them to get some facts that you wrote about and other places too. And a lot of other people write also back to what you were talking about, the scientism, and also that the Enlightenment took the spirit away and put man's mind in control over God. And there's quite a number of books about this, and it's agreeing with you, and I've been studying. I agree with also, but just about 15 minutes about what I said about his leaving Marx and going on his own way.
See, sometimes we have to be honest. Sometimes when we talk
Yes.
about socialism, some people constantly ask me this question, and I'm sure you faced it too, you know. Why are Jewish intellectuals so active in the world of socialism? Why they were and why they are still active in the world of socialism? And we have to address this issue. We have to discuss this, you know?
Yes, yes.
Because sometimes socialists themselves, they feel uncomfortable talking about it. And the people in general, they think there's some kind of stigma about it. But it's, if as a historian, I see how it happened and why it happened, okay? Like, let's look at this guy, Moses Hess, okay? Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time before our talk to show you his portrait, but you can Google him, you know. He was a German Jewish intellectual who lived in the first half of the 19th century, Moses Hess, H-E-S-S, Moses Hess, okay? Who happened to be friend with Marx and Engels, and he introduced them to each other. And he tried to move away from the world of Judaism. He tried to assimilate himself into German society. But trying to assimilate in German society, of course, he faced a bunch of anti-Semitism, okay? So he tried, he kept trying, he kept trying, and eventually he became desperate. He couldn't do it, okay? Because many people said, we don't want to deal with you, or kind of making kind of jokes about him. So he felt uncomfortable. And eventually he came to conclusion that we need to create this internationalist cosmopolitan world where your ethnicity or race will have no meaning, okay? A society without borders, okay? Since he was interested in science, since he read Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, he was hooked on these ideas. And in his time, it was very popular to talk about classes of people, okay? This teaching that society was divided into classes, it had been created before Marx and Engels. So there were some writers who said, after the French Revolution, when we destroyed this feudal aristocracy, their privileges, it was okay. But instead, we create new inequalities. So now we have rich people and the poor people. So the poor people, it's industrial working class in the cities, and rich people who accumulated like business, because of their business activities, they accumulated a lot of riches. So we need make a revolution to introduce this equality. So basically, Moses Hess became interested in this stuff, and he said, what if we make a revolution? Okay, what if we eliminate national borders? Okay, what we eliminate the rich people? Okay, and create society where everybody would be a worker. Okay, nobody will be thinking about ethnic borders, racial borders. Okay, and it was socialism. Okay, socialism. Remember, if you read Communist Manifesto, the last phrase in the Communist Manifesto says, workers don't have fatherland. Workers don't have fatherland. Workers of all countries unite. What a wonderful message for a Jewish person who wants to be assimilated. So we will play down ethnicity, we will play down nationalism, you know, and we're going to talk about this nice kumbaya world, global world without any borders. You know, that's what basically Moses Hess was thinking about, okay? That is why he was helping Marx and Engels to create this communist militant version of socialism called communism, okay? So they were dreaming about society with no borders, no ethnicity, no race, because as a Jew, it was comfortable for him to live in this society, okay? And he prompted Marx actually to move this way. And then Marx also had to cope with his Jewish origin. If you forgot, Karl Marx was a German Jewish journalist, okay? And he also faced anti-Semitism. In fact, the first published work of Marx was not a Communist Manifesto. His first published work written by Karl Marx, I make an emphasis here, 1844, it was the article called On the Jewish Question, okay, where he addressed an interesting issue. He said, it's very important, a lot of Germans, a lot of Europeans criticize Jews, Karl Marx said, for being obsessed with money, okay? And it's correct, Karl Marx said. He said, it's correct. That is why sometimes Karl Marx is blamed in anti-Semitism. Some people call him a self-hating Jew, okay? So he even says, I quote Karl Marx, what is the God of the Jews? The God of the Jews is Geld. So Geld is a German word, money. So Jews were marginalized. They were forced into so-called Jewish occupations, okay? But at the same time, in the same article, he said, actually, we people in general, Jews and non-Jews, we picked up their own target, you know? Instead of targeting Jews and their philosophy, says Karl Marx, we need to target capitalism, okay? Jews, they became a victim of not Judaism, but capitalism, because Judaism is part of capitalism, okay? Because he said, among Christians, we also have this rotten society, rotten philosophy, which spreads in our industrial cities, where people are talking about money making, where people setting up businesses and all this stuff. So he said, it's not about Judaism, it's about capitalism. He said, all of us, Jews and non-Jews, we have to be united against capitalism. Do you see what's going on here? So basically, he wanted to project this hatred, you know, to channel this hatred against capitalism in general, okay? If you read carefully his work. Basically, what I'm trying to say that socialism became a very important niche, cultural, intellectual, and social niche for those Jewish people who were discriminated against, okay? For example, in 1920s, 1930s, I read memoirs of one Jewish revolutionary, okay? Elizabeth Paretsky, okay? 1969, published by University of Michigan, the title of the book, Our Own People, okay? Where she describes her own Jewish compatriots from Eastern Europe who joined the Soviet cause, who joined communist parties in Eastern Europe. And she said, many Jews joined Polish Communist Party because in Poland, there was no other group to join, because Communist Party was the only one that preached this cosmopolitan internationalist message, okay? Because the other groups were preaching Polish nationalism. See, that's what I'm trying to say. So socialism became a niche, okay, for many Jews to escape whatever they believed that if they felt they were discriminated against. I recommend you to read the book, okay? It's called Jewish Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism, okay? That's the title of the book. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the author, but you can Google it. Jewish Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism, okay? So you will read it, and the guy who wrote this book, he makes this excellent point, okay? He said, don't look for the conspiracies here. Everything is natural. Whenever we feel that there's a niche for us to enter, okay? For example, why do we find a lot of business people among libertarians? I will tell you why. Because it's a good niche for us who want to. You will not see social workers. you will not see too many, how I would say, some kind of social activists, green activists among libertarians. You mostly see, if you come for a conference, Mises Institute, you will see a lot of business people, people from business schools, okay? Even in like my university and other universities, you will see more left-oriented people where among historians, among sociologists, Auguste Comte, among geographers, but you will see fewer left people among whom, among economists, among political scientists, okay? Because we are searching for certain intellectual niches where we feel comfortable. I think it's clear enough. I'm trying to explain to you what's going on. Okay.
Well, I can take some more from what they can find on the internet, but also from your book. Again, Moses Hess thought he was a forerunner. He was the forerunner of Zionism, and he thought of himself as a communist messiah who was greater than Jesus Christ. He propagated evangelical communism.
Yes, I'm glad, Richard. I'm glad that you interrupted me. Okay, go ahead. What? Because I want to mention something. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, and as you said, he's a fountainhead of the socialist colonization of Palestine, a radical intellectual who had heavily contributed to the, let me turn the page, intellectual formation of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in 1840s, and he was called Red Moses. So anyway, I wanted to get that in.
Yes, I appreciate very much because, see, in fact, I consider you as a person who will help me to move on, because you interrupted me exactly at the right time, at the right spot. It's very
Well, I did something right.
Yeah, and I will explain to you why it's so important. Because look, I finished when I described Moses Harris and his friends Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels when they came up with this internationalist, cosmopolitan communism. And Moses Hess at first was part of this movement. But then what happened? Again, let's look at the personal biography of Moses Hess. What happened with him? By living in Germany, he realized eventually, so the project of internationalist cosmopolitan communism didn't kick in. It didn't resonate with many Germans. So many Germans were very nationalistic people, okay? And some of them were not, many of them, in fact, were not ready to join Karl Marx and Engels. Yes, some joined, but majority not. In fact, Germans were becoming more nationalistic by the end of the 19th century. Why? Because Germany was not united yet. Germany became united in 1871. And he was upset about it. He said, oh my God, we have such a wonderful message. We want to suggest that people become cosmopolitan, forget about their nationality, everything, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So he became frustrated about his own project. So he parts his ways with Marx and Engels. But Marx and Engels continue to preach the same philosophy, class-based philosophy, globalist, no borders, all workers united. But Moses Hess gradually parts with them. And what he says in his memoirs, he said, I became frustrated about German society and Europeans in general. I came to conclusion that there is no room for me as a Jew in this society. So my big nose will be always a Jewish nose. Okay, that's what he writes. I quote him. So I will find no room in Europe. And he's switching the gears. And that's how he wrote a very important book, a landmark book called Rome and Jerusalem, published in 1862, where he introduced a new concept. He said, we Jews, unfortunately, we don't have room in European society because Europeans are going to be racist all the time. They are not welcoming us, okay? See, kind of, for better, for worse, he exaggerated this. Obviously, he faced some real discrimination, but anyway, he made this statement. And what he said in this book, he said, we need to go to Palestine. We need to go to Palestine and we need to set up agricultural socialist communities there. But again, socialist communities. And we need to show to the rest of the world, since we are the chosen people, the Bible calls us the chosen people. We have to show to the rest of the world that we are going to have our own land and we can set up socialism in Palestine. And that will be it. So we will show the way to humankind, and the rest of the world, especially in Europe, since they believe in Christianity, they will see how we are economically successful, socially successful. So we will create these socialist communities and everybody would imitate us. So that is why Moses Hearst, not many people know about it. He was the first Zionist, basically, but he was socialist Zionist. In fact, I will tell you more. When he died, his grave at first was in Germany, of course, and the sign on the grave said, the founder of the German socialist movement, okay? But when Israel was created, his grave was removed. It was moved to Israel, and it was set on a place where one of the first kibbutz settlements was founded. I will remind you, kibbutz, it's a name of a socialist settlement. There were 400 of them, more than 400 of them in Israel, socialist settlements, okay? So one of the first kibbutz socialist settlements founded in 1930s, 1940s. Kibbutz, it's agricultural socialist settlement, okay? And a bunch of them.
That's all I wanted. That's enough. You can go ahead with the rest.
So that is why Israeli government took his grave from Germany and set up in one of the kibbutz settlements. And now it has the new sign. It says the father of socialism and Zionism. Basically, right now, Moses Hess was included into this pantheon of Zionism. Okay. So eventually his project was fulfilled because especially in 1920s, 1930s, when Eastern European countries started to create their national states all over Europe. Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, Austria, Poland, Hungary. Okay, there was no room for Jews, and all of them, many of them moved to Palestine and from Russian Empire, where there were pogroms against Jews. So they escaped to Palestine, and many of them set up these communities, socialist communities, kibbutz communities, exactly what Moses Hearst had predicted before. So they did it. It was a bunch of communist communities. Some of them were communist communities. Some of them were socialist communities. So it means the moderate version of communism. Some of them were Marxist communities. So everything was socialized, more authoritarian. Some of them more tolerant, you know, like co-ops. They created cooperatives, okay, socialist cooperatives, a bunch of communities. And I found out interesting things. So the sponsors of these communities were the big Jewish capitalists of Europe and America. So basically it was a socialist project in 1920s, 1930s that was sponsored by Jewish private entrepreneurs. Why? Because it helped to protect the ethnic borders of the Jewish territory, okay? Because at that time, Jews who were discriminated against, they were looking for this opportunity to create, to find the land for themselves, okay? And Jewish business people in Europe and America, they established a so-called Jewish National Fund that was purchasing land for Jews, and it gave this land to the Jews. But again, didn't sell the land to the Jews, but it gave them for temporary use. So the land could not be sold. You could rent this land, you could lease, okay? You could occupy it. But as soon as the Jewish National Fund purchased a land from the Arabs, again, a very important thing, the land was not seized from the Arabs. So that's where I disagree with this Arabic nonsense propaganda, which is popular on the left right now. They said that Jews seized the land of Palestinians. No, I researched this question. The land was purchased from the Muslim or Arab absentee lords. But as soon as the land in Palestine was purchased, it became a collective land domain, not to be sold to any non-Jews. And Jews only could get this land for temporary use, to create a kibbutz, to create a cooperative settlement. They couldn't sell this land. So that's how we have 400 socialist settlements who received this land from Jewish National Fund. And they created these settlements that were military socialist settlements along the borders of would-be Israel. So before 1948, there was a bunch of frontier settlements created by immigrant Jews in these new lands purchased by the National Fund, National Jewish Fund, where they established settlements. And since many Arabs hated them, so they armed themselves, and it did help the new state of Israel to protect itself. So basically, socialism was used by Jewish immigrants as the way to mobilize themselves. Okay, because when the Israeli army was created, when it came to protect the borders, that's when kibbutz settlement started to die. Okay, because there was no sponsorship anymore. So eventually, Jewish business people in Europe and America, they stopped sponsoring socialist settlements called kibbutz. And Israeli government did the same. By 1970s, Israeli government stopped giving money to kibbutz. And that's when they crumbled. They collapsed because these socialist settlements could exist only at the expense of the private businesses or the Israeli government. So they practiced manual labor. They taught their members how to defend themselves. Okay, the manual labor was very important in Jewish socialist settlements. Why? Because many people who came to live in Jewish settlements in Palestine, they believed in hard physical work. They were literally obsessed with this. Why? Because it was a religious obsession with labor. Some Jewish settlers, they said, give us the most deadly spots, the hottest spots, the spots in the desert, swampy areas. Why? We want to show that Jews can perform physical labor. So they criticized themselves. They said, we Jews, we were hooked on so-called Jewish professions. So we want to show the world that we are performing the physical labor. We can become a real nation. See? It was a socialist project, but the goal was still nationalism. And that's another interesting point that I make in my book. No matter what kind of socialist projects we had everywhere, all over the world, Africa, Asia, Palestine, Soviet Union, these projects always evolved gradually, suddenly, but ultimately, all these projects, they evolved into some kind of nationalist project, ethnic project, identity project, everywhere. So they could start with the cosmopolitan talk, internationalism, kumbaya, global world, let's hug each other, workers of all countries unite. But when everything was planted on the ground, eventually it turned into some kind of identity project, either nationalism or identity, ethnic nationalism, something like that. And the Jewish socialism in Palestine, agricultural socialism, vividly shows how it happened. It's like a textbook example. So that is why I called my chapter from this book, socialism book, Blood and Soil in the Palestine Desert, and I put the words blood and soil in quotation marks, okay? And it's a provocation, basically. I tried to provoke my readers, okay? Because normally we hear these expression, blood and soil, when we talk about this deadly national socialism in Germany, okay? But I tried to show my readers that simultaneously, when Hitlerite socialism was developing in Nazi Germany, that eventually resulted in the Holocaust and everything, you know the story. Simultaneously, we have like a backlash, a reactive project, as a reaction to German National Socialism, we have Jewish nationalist socialism called Socialist Zionism, okay? I'm not saying, see, that's what the problem, because some people say, oh, how can you say this Jewish National Socialism? I'm not looking for good and bad guys. I'm just saying how it happened. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, my friend talked to him about this book who lived in Ramallah for 18 years. likes that about what you're just reporting the facts. You're not taking sides. And I want to end this, and you just make a comment for 10 seconds.
Sure.
But in that chapter, you quote a book, page 211 of the book, note 230. Israel is the state that was launched as a socialist Zionism project. After many years of studying, I quit keeping up with it after 400 hours. I came to know this. And do you remember the name of that book? I didn't write it down. Note 230.
See, right now I don't have my book in front of me.
Yeah, well, I could look
I
it up.
apologize.
I could look it up. I have a book, but that's not important. But it doesn't have to be that book. We know that anyway. So
Absolutely.
what I hope we can do sometime is continue this, because you have the book is so detailed. We can't cover everything, of course.
No. And I apologize that I probably exhausted your patience, because it's a long talk. We probably spent more than 1 hour, right?
Well, people who really care will listen to it. And I don't know who those people are. I'm one of them. I'm going to go back and listen to it.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it.
will post, it's already posted, but I will post your presentation in AERC last March, where we really got to talk right before you spoke. You know, we spoke a little bit, but we spoke then about 20 or 30 minutes, and I enjoyed that. So I really do appreciate your doing this, and you can unrecord it now. And
Sounds good. Okay, let's
if you want to talk,
recording.
if you want to